Hi, today we're going to learn a little bit about domain and range on a continuous graph. And before we get there, we're just going to quickly review over what the domain and the range are. So domain are all the x values. So in this capacity, the x values are -3, 0, 1, and 5. And your range are all of your y values, and your y values are 0, 2, 3, and 4. And each one of these, the table, the ordered pairs, and the graph, represent the same domain and range. So today, while we're working, we're going to be looking at domain as the same definition that it is the x values of the continuous graph. So we're looking at from the far left to the far right of the graph, all the values that this graph contains, and that is going to be our domain. And the range is the height of the graph from the top of the graph all the way down to the bottom of the graph. And that distance right there, that vertical distance, is going to be your range. So keeping that same definition of your x values for domain and your y values for range is the graph of this circle and figuring out the domain and range of the circle. So the first thing I'm going to suggest that you do is just draw the smallest possible rectangle around the entirety of your continuous graph. So in this capacity, you can see the smallest possible rectangle that touches all the sides. And then what we're going to do is we're first going to look at the domain. And we're looking at the domain, we're looking how far left the graph goes to how far right the graph goes. So with that being said, the furthest right that the graph goes is all the way over here. That means all the values are less than or equal to 5, all the x values. And again, when you go to this side, all the values are greater than or equal to -5. Now, we're not going to write that. We're not going to just leave it like that. We're going to write it in a nice inequality sentence as one fluid sentence. So that is going to be -5 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 5. Later on, you'll probably learn about set notation, but for right now, this is just fine. And moving on, range is how far up the graph goes and the lowest points that the graph hits. So in this capacity, where ranges are y values, so y is always going to be less than or equal to, in this capacity, also 5, and y is going to be greater than or equal to, in this capacity, -5, which kind of makes sense because it is a circle. Now, with that being said, again, the final answer that we would end up writing is -5 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to 5. A look at the next graph, and we're going to use the same process. So very first process, draw the smallest possible rectangle around your image so that your line fits inside of the rectangle. So with that being said, domain, we're going to start with. And the domain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it does not pass 6. So that is x is less than or equal to 6. And we're using a less than or equal to because it is a closed circle. And then going to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So x is always greater than or equal to -7. That's going to be written as -7 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 6. And for our range highest point is here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So y is less than or equal to 4. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Y is greater than or equal to -5, which means that sentence is -5 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to 4. We have a horizontal line. And a horizontal line is a little bit hard to draw a rectangle around. So using that tip doesn't really work in this capacity. So what does work is still doing the same idea. So if I see how far left my graph goes, I can notice right here that the most left it ever hits is right here at -2, which means x is greater than or equal to -2. Now, when I come over from this side and I go over, I run that into hitting an arrow. And what that arrow means is that the line is going to extend indefinitely to the right. That means my line will always continue. There will be no parameters set for the domain to the right, which means that is the end. My domain is x is greater than or equal to -2. All values for x will show up on this line as long as they are greater than or equal to -2. Now the next thing we're going to do is look for the range. So as I come down, I end up seeing I'm hitting the line at y equals -1. When I come up, I hit the line at y is -1. That means that y is not greater than -1, y is not less than -1, y equals -1. Moving on, we're going to use that same example of trying to draw the smallest possible rectangle. And for our domain, coming in from the left, we end up hitting an arrow. So that's important to know. That means that that arrow is going to just keep on going out, out, out. That line will never end. And eventually it will hit every single x value in that direction. So there is no restriction that I can put. Now, when I come in from the right, I end up hitting that another arrow. That means this line is going to go on and on and on, higher and higher, and more and more and more to the right. It will hit indefinitely every single x value to the right. That means that my domain is all real numbers. So all x values are in my domain. Another way that we can write that is this symbol. All right, and my range, coming up from the bottom, I notice that this is the lowest point on my graph. That means that all values are going to be greater than or equal to -2. Coming up or coming down from the top, I notice I hit this arrow and eventually end up hitting this arrow as well. And what that means is no matter what, I am going to include every single value above -2. So every value, it's not all real numbers because the values below -2 are not included. Next up, we have a good old line. Oop. Let's undo that and try that one again. Try to draw the smallest possible rectangle a little bit. Good. All right. And for my domain, coming in from the left, I end up hitting an arrow. That means it's going to continue on forever and ever. No restrictions there. Domain coming in from the right, going to hit that arrow. That means there's no restrictions there. It's going to go on and on and on. It will be every single x value to the right. That means all real numbers. And range, come down, and the first thing that you're going to hit on the line is that arrow. Means forever and ever, it's going to be going up, up, up. No restrictions there. It will hit every single y value. Coming in from the bottom, very first thing that you end up hitting is that arrow. There you go. That means all real numbers. All right. Well, thanks so much.